During beachside wedding, millionaire woman marries local fisherman family walks out. She stays. The morning sun painted the Pacific coastline in shades of gold and amber as waves crashed rhythmically against the weathered cliffs of Mendocino, California. This wasn't the cathedral wedding venue that had been reserved for 18 months, nor the country club reception that had been planned down to the last crystal glass. Instead, wooden chairs sat arranged in simple rows on the sand, facing an arch of driftwood and wildflowers that swayed gently in the ocean breeze. Isabella Thornfield stood at the edge of the water, her bare feet sinking slightly into the cool sand as she watched the horizon. At 28, she commanded a tech empire worth $400 million, her artificial intelligence company revolutionizing healthcare diagnostics across America. Her wedding dress, a flowing creation of organic cotton rather than imported silk, moved like seafoam around her ankles, a deliberate choice that would have horrified her mother's society friends. The guest list that morning was unlike anything the Thornfield family had ever sanctioned. Local fishermen sat alongside tech executives, their weathered hands and calloused fingers a stark contrast to manicured nails and designer watches. Children from the village played in the shallow waves, while venture capitalists checked their phones nervously, uncertain how to navigate this unfamiliar social terrain. The scene represented everything Isabella's family had worked generations to rise above. The story had begun 8 months earlier during what was supposed to be a routine business retreat. Isabella's company had rented a coastal facility for a leadership summit, choosing Mendocino for its isolation and lack of distractions. The irony wasn't lost on her now that the very remoteness meant to enhance focus had instead introduced the greatest distraction of her life. That first morning, she had walked the beach before dawn, seeking clarity on a difficult decision. The fog hung low over the water, and she nearly stumbled over fishing nets being mended by someone sitting on the rocks. Daniel Santos, 31, looked up from his work with eyes the color of sea glass, apologizing for blocking her path while continuing to weave the torn sections with practiced precision. Their initial conversation lasted only minutes, him explaining the importance of strong nets for deep water fishing, her listening with unexpected fascination to a world where success was measured not in quarterly profits, but in the weight of the day's catch. She learned he was fourth-generation Portuguese-American, his great-grandfather having arrived with nothing but fishing knowledge and determination to build a life from the sea's offerings. What began as morning encounters became intentional meetings. Isabella found herself walking the beach earlier each day, drawn not just to Daniel's quiet wisdom, but to the simplicity of his existence. He worked with his hands, understood weather patterns through instinct rather than satellite data, and found contentment in rhythms that had sustained his family for generations. His small house overlooked the harbor, filled with handmade furniture and photographs spanning decades of Santos family fishing expeditions. Daniel saw something in Isabella too, though he knew nothing of her corporate success or family wealth. She introduced herself simply as Izzy, letting him assume she was another tech worker escaping city pressures for a week. Their conversations ranged from his stories of following whale migrations to her carefully edited tales of problem-solving challenges, both finding unexpected common ground in their appreciation for systems as natural. Hers technological. Their relationship deepened through shared experiences that money couldn't buy. Dawn fishing expeditions where Isabella learned to read water conditions and wind patterns. Evening walks where Daniel shared local history passed down through generations of fishermen. Quiet dinners in Ismata's kitchen where she discovered the satisfaction of meals created from the day's catch, prepared with ingredients grown in his small garden. She learned about the challenges facing his community corporate fishing fleets, depleting traditional grounds, climate change altering migration patterns, young people leaving for cities because the sea no longer provided reliable income. Daniel worked not just as a fisherman, but as an unofficial community leader, organizing cooperative efforts and advocating for sustainable practices that honored both tradition and necessity. The moment Isabella revealed her true identity came during a particularly difficult week when a storm had damaged several fishing boats beyond their owner's ability to repair. She watched Daniel quietly organize community resources, saw how families shared what little they had, witnessed the dignity with which people faced uncertainty. Unable to remain silent, she offered to help, not just with money, but with the connections and resources her position provided. Daniel's reaction wasn't anger at the deception, but sadness at what he perceived as her lack of trust. The revelation changed their dynamic, introducing complications neither had anticipated. Isabella's wealth could solve many problems facing his community, but accepting such help risked destroying the independence and self-reliance that defined their way of life. Yet love persevered through honest conversation and shared commitment to finding balance. Daniel proposed not with an expensive ring, but with a piece of sea glass worn smooth by decades of waves, transformed by time and tide into something beautiful and unique. The engagement sparked immediate opposition from Isabella's family, who had never imagined their daughter would choose a life so different from their expectations. The Thornfield patriarch, Isabella's father Harrison, had built his real estate empire through calculated risks and strategic partnerships. The idea of his heir marrying beneath her station threatened not just family pride, but business relationships spanning decades. Her mother, Patricia, saw the match as a personal failure. All those cotillion classes, boarding school connections, and society introductions apparently wasted on a daughter who preferred sand between her toes to marble floors beneath designer heels. Family meetings became increasingly tense as wedding plans progressed. The Thornfields offered compromises: a modest ceremony at their country club, a small reception for selected guests, even a prenuptial agreement protecting family assets. Each suggestion missed the fundamental point. Isabella wasn't just marrying Daniel. She was choosing an entirely different way of living that valued community over competition, sustainability over endless growth, and authentic relationships over strategic alliances. The decision to hold the ceremony on the beach represented Isabella's final break with family expectations. She had spent her entire life meeting others' standards, graduating from the right schools, building the right company, dating the right men from the right families. For the first time, she was choosing based solely on what felt true to her heart, regardless of social consequences. As wedding guests began arriving that morning, the cultural divide became immediately apparent. Isabella's tech colleagues, uncomfortable in casual attire, struggled to find common ground with fishing families who had known each other for generations. Her college friends, accustomed to black tie events, seemed lost without assigned seating and printed programs. The contrast highlighted everything Isabella was choosing to leave behind. Harrison and Patricia Thornfield arrived precisely on time, their disapproval evident in every gesture. Patricia's designer dress and heels proved impractical for beach conditions, while Harrison's expensive suit drew curious glances from children who had never seen such formal attire outside of television. They took seats in the front row with expressions suggesting they were attending a funeral rather than a wedding. The ceremony itself reflected Daniel's values rather than social expectations. The officiant was the local parish priest who had known the Santos family for decades, his words emphasizing community, stewardship, and the sacred nature of commitment. Wedding music came from a local guitarist whose weathered hands produced melodies that seemed to blend with the sound of crashing waves. As Isabella walked down the sandy aisle, her choice became undeniable. She moved away from everything her family represented: corporate boardrooms, society galas, strategic marriages that strengthened business empires. With each step toward Daniel, she walked toward a life defined by different measures of success: daily satisfaction, community connection, and the sustainable rhythms of coastal living. The tension reached its breaking point during the exchange. Of vows. Isabella's words, carefully chosen to honor both love and her new community, struck her family as a deliberate rejection of everything they had provided. When she promised to share not just Daniel's dreams, but his commitment to protecting the ocean and supporting fishing families, Harrison and Patricia exchanged looks that spoke volumes about their sense of betrayal, the moment that would define. The day came when Daniel spoke of accepting Isabella not despite her background, but because of her courage to choose authenticity over expectation. His vows acknowledged the sacrifices she was making while promising to honor both her past achievements and her future dreams. The words resonated with wedding guests who understood the magnitude of Isabella's choice, but fell on deaf ears among family members who saw only abandonment of duty and privilege. As the couple exchanged rings, his great-grandmother's simple band and the sea glass engagement ring, the divide in the gathering became impossible to ignore. Fishing families wept openly at the beauty of love transcending social boundaries, while Thornfield relatives sat rigid with disapproval. The moment crystallized everything. Isabella was gaining and everything she was prepared to lose. The moment Harrison Thornfield rose from his seat, the beach fell silent except for the eternal rhythm of waves against shore. His movement wasn't subtle or deliberate, theatrical gesture designed to convey maximum disapproval to both wedding guests and his daughter. Patricia followed immediately, her designer heels struggling against the sand as she clutched her purse. Like armor against the foreign environment surrounding her, the exodus began with whispered urgency. Isabella's Aunt Margaret, Uncle Robert, and their twin daughters, her childhood companions at family gatherings, gathered their belongings with carefully controlled panic. Cousins who had shared holiday traditions and summer vacations avoided eye contact as they prepared to leave. The family's departure wasn't just physical. It represented the severing of relationships spanning Isabella's entire lifetime. Other guests watched in stunned silence as the Thornfield contingent made their way across the sand toward the parking area. Isabella's college roommate hesitated, torn between loyalty to old friendships and social pressure from her companion, hedge fund manager who clearly viewed the fishing community with disdain. Her boarding school friends faced similar conflicts, their discomfort evident as they weighed personal affection against social expectations. Yet Isabella remained motionless at the altar, her hand firmly clasped in Daniel's weathered palm. She had anticipated this moment for months, knowing her family's departure was not just possible but probable. The pain of their rejection cut deeply, but it couldn't compare to the clarity she felt about her choice. Every relationship that mattered most to her was either standing supportively behind her or holding her hand at the altar. The priest, Father Miguel, had officiated weddings for 3 decades, but had never witnessed such a dramatic family schism. His experience with the Portuguese fishing community had taught him about the strength required to face uncertain waters, and he recognized that same quality in Isabella as she watched her previous life walk away across the sand. Rather than stopping the ceremony, he continued with quiet dignity that honored both the couple's commitment and the gravity of the moment. Daniel's family filled the silence with gentle encouragement. His mother, Alina, stepped forward to embrace Isabella with the fierce protectiveness she showed her own children. His father, Manuel, nodded with the quiet approval of a man who had spent his life distinguishing between those who could weather storms and those who fled at the first sign of trouble. Aunts, uncles, and cousins who had initially questioned whether Isabella could adapt to their world now saw her strength under pressure. The local community responded with instinctive solidarity. Fishing families who had faced their own hardships, economic uncertainty, dangerous working conditions, environmental challenges, recognized the courage required to choose love over security. Children who had been playing in the waves gathered quietly, sensing the importance of the moment, without fully understanding its implications. Isabella's tech colleagues found themselves in an unexpected position. Many had initially attended out of professional obligation or curiosity about their CEO's surprising romantic choice. Now they witnessed their leader demonstrating the same decisiveness and integrity that had built her company. Some recognized that Isabella's choice reflected values they admired but had never seen applied to personal relationships. As the ceremony concluded with the couple's first kiss as husband and wife, the remaining guests erupted in celebration that mixed Portuguese traditions with spontaneous joy. Manuel Santos produced a bottle of aguardiente that had been aging since Daniel's birth, while Elena began organizing the fishing families into an impromptu receiving line. The reception that followed bore no resemblance to the country club affair that had originally been planned. Tables appeared as if by magic, weathered boards supported by sawhorses, covered with hand-embroidered cloths that Elena and her sisters had created over decades. The wedding feast consisted of the day's catch prepared in traditional Portuguese style, accompanied by vegetables from community gardens and bread baked in Elena's kitchen since dawn. Wine came from a local vineyard owned by Daniel's cousin, its quality rivaling bottles that sold for hundreds of dollars in San Francisco. Restaurants. Music emerged organically as community members produced instruments that seemed to appear from nowhere. Acoustic guitars, accordion, and voices trained by generations of sea shanties created melodies that blended Portuguese fado with American folk traditions. Dancing began on the sand, with children teaching tech executives traditional steps while Isabella's remaining colleagues attempted to follow rhythms that spoke of ocean voyages and homecoming celebrations. The contrast between this celebration and typical Thornfield family events couldn't have been more stark. Instead of assigned seating and formal toasts, people gathered in natural clusters, sharing stories and food with the easy intimacy of extended family. Rather than carefully orchestrated entertainment, joy arose spontaneously from community connections that had been strengthened by decades of mutual support. Isabella found herself surrounded by women who had initially seemed to have nothing in common with her privileged background. Elena Santos and her sisters shared stories about raising children in a fishing community, their wisdom earned through experience rather than advanced degrees. They spoke of budgeting for uncertain income, creating beauty from simple materials, and finding satisfaction in work that served essential human needs. Daniel's male relatives engaged Isabella's tech colleagues in conversations that revealed unexpected parallels between their worlds. Both industries required reading complex patterns, weather and water conditions versus market trends and consumer behavior. Both demanded the ability to take calculated risks while protecting long-term sustainability. Both valued craftsmanship and took pride in solutions that served larger purposes. As sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, the celebration evolved into something approaching magic. Bonfires appeared on the beach, their flames dancing against the darkening horizon. Children roasted marshmallows while adults shared increasingly personal stories about love, loss, and the courage required to build meaningful lives. The artificial boundaries between social classes dissolved in the warmth of genuine human connection. Isabella's phone buzzed repeatedly with messages from family members and society friends, but she left it unanswered in her small clutch purse. For the first time in her adult life, she was fully present in a moment rather than managing multiple competing demands. The freedom felt both terrifying and exhilarating, like standing at the edge of a cliff and choosing to fly rather than step back to safety. The evening's most profound moment came when Elena Santos offered Isabella the traditional Portuguese blessing given to new daughters-in-law. The words, spoken in a mixture of Portuguese and English, welcomed her not just into the Santos family, but into the broader community of women who had chosen love over convenience, authenticity over security. The blessing acknowledged both the losses Isabella had accepted and the gifts she would receive in return. As the celebration continued into the night, Isabella understood that she hadn't just married Daniel, she had joined a community that would support her through challenges she couldn't yet imagine while expecting her, to contribute to their collective welfare in ways that went far beyond financial assistance. The responsibility felt heavier and more meaningful than any corporate boardroom decision she had ever faced. When the last guests finally departed near midnight, Isabella and Daniel walked hand in hand along the water's edge, their wedding attire damp with sea spray and sand. The contrast with how her original wedding plans would have concluded in a luxury hotel suite, surrounded by expensive gifts and formal photograph, struck her as profound rather than disappointing. They had chosen each other, but more importantly, they had chosen a way of life that prioritized community over individual achievement, sustainability over endless growth, and authentic relationships over strategic alliances. The path ahead would require both of them to navigate the challenges of bridging different worlds while honoring the values that had brought them together. The waves that had witnessed their vows continued their eternal rhythm, indifferent to human drama, but somehow blessing the choice that had been made on their shores. Isabella's family might return eventually, or they might not, but she had gained something more valuable than their approval. She had gained the courage to define success on her own terms and to build a life that honored both love and purpose. As they climbed the path toward Daniel's small house, now their shared home, Isabella realized that she had finally learned the difference between having everything and having what truly mattered. The distinction would shape every decision in their marriage and every choice about the kind of community they would help create together. Their story would become local legend, told and retold around fishing boat breakfasts and community gatherings, as an example of love's power to transcend social boundaries. More importantly, it would inspire others to examine their own choices and consider whether security was worth sacrificing authenticity, whether family approval mattered more than personal truth. The beach wedding had ended, but the real adventure was just beginning.
Thank you for watching this story unfold with us here on M&A The Story Unfolds. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new tale. We'd love to know where you're watching from. Leave a comment below and tell us what part of the world you're joining us from. Your support means everything. See you in the next story.